What's up, Internet? Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I am joined again with my friend Isaac, except this time down in the Keys. Welcome back to the podcast, man, from the Keys. How's it going?
Uh, I, it's going.
Just living the dream.
I'm living something.
Yeah.
I'm living in sunny St. Florida now, which is an experience. I don't think I'm ever going to get used to how loud the sun is, and just quite how many mosquitoes there are. Uh,
Yes.
it's about 85 to 90 right now. Apparently, like it doesn't get below 70 year round. Um, but it's so humid right now that it feels about where you are at now,
Yeah.
California.
Yep. About 110 and just roasting. No humidity, but you're still sweating like crazy regardless.
Yep.
Yep. So what took you down there, man? Tell the people why you
Yeah.
rolled across the country.
There's a story here. So I ended up led to Florida, led to the Keys, um, called there or pulled there by God via a friend of mine who lives here. I took a prophetic course through her. Um, and it worked out that towards the tail end of my time in Vancouver, which is where I was last time we did this conversation, I was sort of debating where to go and what to do from here because God very audibly called me from Reading to Vancouver to meet up with my dad again. Things didn't quite work out there like I had hoped. So I was working through that. I visited our friend Joe in Canada, stayed there for about a week. And when I came back, um, I think it was literally like the last hour before I got on my flight back to the US. Um, one of my friends from a prophetic course that I took really sort of just laid her cards on the table and sort of pushed for me to come, said, you don't have to do this, but if you do, there's everything is sort of lined up. There's a place for me to rent from, this other lady that was a mutual friend of ours, also from that course. Um, there's a job lined up. There's a community here, like a vineyard here. That's the church I'm going to. I'm going to a vineyard in the Keys here to just sort of be around and love you. And I don't want you to be alone, I don't want you to isolate because by then she had clocked how well I isolate. Uh, and that had come like literally just like a week or two after I had said to God, Lord, I just want someone, anyone for once to fight for me to be somewhere, or to be there, to come there or be with them. And so um I initially didn't want to come here. I initially didn't want to leave Reading for that matter. I didn't want to head to Vancouver in the first place, but I had followed God. And this time when it's sort of like just so lined up, um, I took it I took it for what it was. I took it for the hand of God, the move of God that it was. And so I spent another week or two, sort of finishing things up on the West Coast. And then I furiously drove for like 3 or 4 days straight, halfway across the country to visit my grandmother in Illinois, which was my other option. Uh, and then spent like a week there and drove another furious like 3 or 4 days down to the Florida Keys. Let me tell you, there's a lot of stuff as you drive. The U.S. is big, um, a
It's
lot bigger.
huge.
I, yes, it was an interesting drive. It felt very much like the whole way. It felt like the Israelites in the desert, right? Following the cloud by day and the fire by night. There's a Chris Rexema song. narrow road where you go, that's a line in the song, right? And that was sort of the playlist for that move, for that drive, you know, cloud by day, fire by evening, you're a lamp, a light to my feet, you know. It's from scripture, and that's sort of what led me here. And so here, um, it's been a hell of a thing. The
Yep.
Keys, for anyone who doesn't know, are a popular tourist destination. I promise, though, the life of a like someone who lives there is totally different from like the touristy thing, as it always is.
Yep.
But they're essentially like a string of islands separated by like bays, channels, and mangroves, you know, in the middle of the ocean. And I had sort of grasped ahead of time that um, I was going to be surrounded by ocean, that it was going to be a huge move. You know, I didn't grasp until I got here, like, oh, wow, this is happening. This is real now. And one of the interesting things about the Keys that I found as I drove here is that it's almost like each individual key has something going on, like in the spirit.
Yep.
Like each individual key is almost a little province unto itself,
Hmm.
or a little, you know,
Yep.
region unto itself, spiritually speaking. And of course, connections there, not totally like isolated. Um, and I saw a lot of like sort of a lot of just the local spirits as I drove in. But you know, they all answer to, even though each of the keys are sort of separate, they all answer to sort of the local ruler
Yeah,
of
the
the key.
regional principality.
Yeah. And so, in that, in this case, is I think Calypso, and I think her sort of sway over the populace and over these regions, I think it does actually extend to Cuba, which is interesting because of like, you know, you think of like Calypso music, you think of like sort of life on the beach, that sort of thing. What I've realized as I've been here is that beneath all that and beneath the tourism and the sort of uh party lifestyle that sort of grabs a hold of people and doesn't let go sometimes, there's a sort of dead end hopelessness. And so one of the interesting things about the Keys is that a lot of the spirits here, um, good and bad, are connected to hope, either hopelessness or um, hopefulness.
Hmm.
You know, um, I also as I drove in saw an angel, like he was like knee deep in the ocean, and his head split the clouds.
Hmm.
It was another one of those huge, and he was jolly. That's the thing. He was like a fisherman in old time, like think like, you know, Middle Eastern sort of like fisherman robes or garments, you know, right? Like so bare chested, but like, you know, with everything like tied up, you
Yeah.
know, around the waist. Uh and every time like I would drive and like sort of see him pass him on the horizon, he'd pop up later in a different sort of like I think he was having fun in a different sort of pose, right?
Uh,
So there's a couple of the whole like the, you know, muscle like body like, you know, yeah, I'm strong and I know it, I'm built, you know. And then a couple of those times he one of those times he had a huge net that could have like pulled in like trawlers, you know.
hmm.
Another time he had a huge spear, and I'm like, I don't, do I want to know what he's spearfishing with that thing? Kind of, but also at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. It'd be a big spirit there for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, he was jolly.
Hmm.
He was joyful in a way that, you know, the world isn't. joyful in that way, right? It's a different sort of joy when God touches it.
Yeah.
And that's what the other thing I've found is that living here in the Keys, there is a lot of genuine hope and joy, you know. I think the church I've been going to is sort of a lighthouse, like a beacon of that. It's a really good church, very both like both walking, in spirit and in the word, you know, and very intentional about cultivating those things.
Yeah.
They're very warm, they're very generous, they're very welcoming and embracing, which is what I've needed after my sort of experiences with community and with the church. But there's also a lot of like hopelessness and a sort of false false positivity, false joy, There's a lot of that too, in sort of up and down these keys. It's sort of it's like a sickness.
Yeah. And so you feel like the Lord led you there, and part of it was just because of the community aspect. Um, what has that looked like as far as what the Lord led you down there for?
Um, I think a lot of it is kind of learning how to go to church again, learning how to not not just like go to go, which I've done a fair bit of, not just go to be burned out and used up and serve and whatever, which I've done a lot of coming from the sort of like small town church that I came from. Um, but to go and just have nothing expected of me but to worship the Lord and to be filled up and to be around people that love the Lord. And I haven't I've only been here like a month and a half now, I think. Maybe a little more, a little less around then. But it's sort of um it feels a little bit like teaching me how to be human again.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
a
So
weird
like
uh
kind of going from being real focused on the spiritual and kind of reminding you that like hey the daily day to day like
I mean,
life.
I'm picking up on the spirits too, but I'm it's it's one of the first times being like it's not the first time, but it's sort of one of the first times being like just in relationship with like spirit led um Bible reading because that is important and not everyone does that. Uh like community of believers again. And so it's in a way it's new for me. I had some of that in Reading. I had a few people there. I still miss it terribly. Less so when I find out that it's like 110 degrees, but you know, um, I had some of that there, but I was still so like raw and simultaneously fragile and very prickly and guarded. Not that I'm not now, but I'm getting there. I was still so raw when I came down to Reading. Um, and that in itself was its own sort of move. Like if we're talking about seasons, um, how do I go into this?
Well, it's a bit of relearning, or I guess getting a more healthy dynamic of community even.
Yeah, and that's I found is important. I think there's something about like gathering together like corporately as a body,
Hmm.
and that doesn't that can look 100 different ways, right? Because church can look 100 different ways more, but there's something about that I think when it's done well, when it's done healthily, even like me sort of still settling in and still sort of figuring out how to do it, it does fuel you. It does fuel me, at least. And so that's part of what I'm relearning, you know. I have a few like good friendships here. I'm working at a homeless shelter, which is mentally, emotionally, and spiritually exhausting. So many different ways. But I'm sort of, I think, I'm learning to like trust that there are good people again,
Hmm.
you know? And that's, I think, important. I think I'm also in a season where, you know, I came from like small town nowhere, you know, dead end. God sort of, that took, um, God sort of changed my trajectory from like going nowhere, you know, to uh, in a very sort of dramatic way, moving me down to Reading,
Yep.
calling me sort of back to like come back into relationship with my father after like 17 years, you know, something like that.
Yep.
Moved back to Vancouver. That didn't work out, I think, quite how any of us were expecting, but it was still a crucial sort of step along the way, even though like in an earthly sense, it wasn't that fruitful. I think it was another one of those like had to happen.
Lessons learned.
Yeah. Well, and lessons learned. And it wasn't just a move back to my earthly father. I think it was another move towards the father.
Hmm.
Right. And then sort of drop of a hat, last possible minute, you know, not knowing where to go. I get moved down here, which is again sort of almost off the map, right? Because Florida Keys, like sure, people come and vacation here, but it's literally like almost off the map of the US, right? We're on islands in the middle of the friggin' ocean, you know? And so I can sort of see the parallels of, yeah, there is a sense in which, like, in the earthly sense, the Keys are a dead end place, you know? Um, you stop on vacation and visit, but there's like not much going on here, you know?
Hmm.
Island life.
Yep.
But I think spiritually, it's totally different. So there's a parallel, right? Started in dead end, got moved around a bunch, came back to dead end, but it's spiritually alive. And I think it's sort of, I think it's one of those situations where like you have to learn to recognize like what's being sown, what's being nourished, more the first fruit or the forefruit of what's coming, you know? And that's something like, to me, it feels like for a long time, there was a total wandering in the wilderness season, right? Then 2 or 3 years ago, a sort of gathering, and then eventually like a sort of crossing over season,
Hmm.
right? This is all like sort of biblical imagery, right? Israel gathering on the other side of the Jordan River, ready to like invade the land, you know, ready to step into the promise. And then I think for a while there was a crossing over. I think for a lot of people there still is, right? Because these patterns play out, um, big picture and small picture, and the whole like it's a wheel within a wheel, right? It happens again and again and again
Yep.
in the small sense, and then in the big sense too.
Yep. Cyclical.
Yeah, what it feels now is, you know, the beginning of the stepping into the promise. At least for me, and I
Yeah.
think I see what it looks like broadly to me that we're in a period where the nations are getting ready to go one way, and I think God is going to go a different way.
Yeah.
And I think there's a window of sort of reconsidering or repentance right now. Um, I don't know when this will go out, but like sort of mid 2025, right? Is where we're at right now.
Yep.
And I think that window of repentance, that window of grace is closing fast. And who knows what's going to come after it. But I think everything that's sown right now has a special sort of like grace on it or a special sort of quality about it. And where what it seems to me is that God's calling people to live with him, right where they're at and to engage with the promise, with the new thing, with the things that they've been promised, right here and now before it even is,
Yeah.
right? A form of sort of, um, the scripture, God calls those things that are not as though they were,
Yep.
right? And he invites his people into that to do that. And so I think that's where I'm at. I'm sort of, I know I'm not gonna stay here for forever, but it feels like by engaging in the process and in the promise and trying to learn how to live life again,
Mm.
not just fight it, not just go on mission, not just like duke it out or survive, but actually live with him and thrive. That itself, for all that there have been a lot of ups and downs here. I'm working through with one of my friends, going through counseling, trying to resolve like my frustration and resentment and bitterness towards God about the past.
Hmm.
Right? Just being real honest, even hate sometimes towards God. Because the wrestling match for me has always been between me and God.
Okay. No, I get it. I mean, there's been times and seasons where I've sort of just stiff armed the Lord or pushed him because I was like, I'm super frustrated with how things are, and um,
Yeah,
kind of going like, this is ridiculous. Like, why am I going through this? Or whether
yeah,
it be the divorce or before that, when I was in seasons where I was yearning for something entirely different, and I'm like, what in the world is this season? This is stupid. I hate it. I don't want anything to do with it. Like, God, do you even give a rip?
yeah. I think for me, it's about the past, right? Because I'm wrestling right now through those things and trying to work through and resolve those things. And this place has been bringing those things back up.
Hmm.
Um, because on one level, like it's shaping me into someone who can actually steward and handle the promise, steward and handle the things that are coming.
Yeah.
And on the other side, like those things in the past, like they can't go with you. Because when you cross the river, there are things that have to stay on the other side that can't go with you into the new,
Yeah.
or it's not new.
Yeah. I feel a similar thing. I've talked about this a couple times recently, but uh I like just being sort of recognizing that my calling out of things in the world right now has been a little bit aggressive, and people pointing that out of like, hey, you need to like it feels like you're intentionally being divisive, and I'm like I'm not trying to just be divisive. I'm trying to like provoke people back to a better comprehension of like what the Lord's doing and what's actually happening under the surface of all this political nonsense and the whole world
Yeah,
propaganda stuff, and trying to I'm just like part of it is me just getting frustrated with all, and then I'll kind of I guess push back and stuff. But some of the conversations I've had recently, I'm starting to realize and remember that on some level, I think the Lord is teaching me even how to deal with things so that in the next season I'm more ready and apt and able to do so better, right? Like
yeah,
I'm reminded that one of the reasons why I ended up staying in St. Louis the when I did a couple of years ago, um, was because somebody gave me basically a prophetic word, and the word was effectively like about these free rein horses that were just kind of on their own and
For a little,
able. Hmm?
I remember a little bit of this. You mentioned it.
Yeah, I don't know if I've said it on the podcast though. I
Yeah,
definitely did say it on Instagram at one point for sure, but either way, like they one of them gets like they both get pulled into the king's stables, and then one of them gets out and they just let it go, and it ends up in a famine. But the other one is taught how to pull the king's carriage, and in order to do that, there needs to be a discipline that other horses wouldn't have, right? But because of that, there's plenty of food, there's plenty of, everything that it needs. Whereas there's a famine in the land and the wild horses aren't getting enough, right? So, but the part that feels, I guess, applicable to this current season is the remembrance that, like, hey, those horses don't move unless the leader of the carriage tells them to move. They don't act unless they're told to act. Whether things are bothering them or not, they stand at attention and wait for the command to move. And so I'm being provoked to remember that, because it's not up to me when I'm irritated by the flies buzz in my ears to just take off and go somewhere else. It's learning how to deal with that, ignore it. Maybe, like horses do, flip the tail or flip the ears, whatever, like whatever's appropriate in the moment, but not to take off and try to go to the thing and verbally tear down the idol. It's unless the Lord Himself has provoked me to do that. And I think that's been big for me in this season, for me particularly. But I can see with I like in your season, it feels like the Lord is has you in a bit of that pruning season where you're kind of being provoked to deal with maybe some of the stuff that you've maybe buried or haven't dealt with and stuff, so that, like you
yeah,
said, you have the ability and the uh I guess the not integrity in like the moral way, but like the structural integrity to handle. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah.
That's how I see it.
I think that's accurate. What's sort of what's been in my mind's eye, what I've been seeing is a picture of like all these clay pots and jars, and maybe even a clay figure or two in there. Um, all the things that all things that I had hoped and dreamed and planned, uh, just struck with an iron rod, you know. And the thing about the rod, right, is it's a symbol of like it's royal authority, right? The scepter and the rod and all that. So it's royal authority, so it's regality, but I think it's God striking down like the plan and the picture that I had had. And there is quite a bit of pain and quite a bit of ache in that, there a lot of my hopes and dreams and a lot of the things I had wanted, were good things, right? There was like pure things there, just mixed and mingled in with lesser things,
Hmm.
or even how do I put it? Does God want just a good thing for you, or does he want the best thing for you?
Yeah.
Right? And
Okay.
that's hard. Because sometimes those good things really, really are good and really are pure, even um or just otherwise good things to have. But God's a consuming fire, and that means that he's not gonna share.
Yeah.
He's not gonna share, and he's not gonna let us settle, I think. Right? Like we can hop off the ride anytime we want. Like
Mm.
let's be honest, like we're all our yes is a part of that, part of this. Our engagement, our willingness to like say yes and to go is part of it. But if we're really on this ride, then maybe there is some pruning to to come. Maybe it is sometimes that in my case, standing around like all these shards of like all my broken dreams and hopes for things that were good but weren't the God thing, you know?
Well, or sometimes just aren't yet.
And that too, right? It doesn't always go like the timing or the planning that we want
Almost never.
or
Yeah.
think should.
Yeah. Well, and I mean it's sort of like what I was talking about with Bernie.
Yeah.
There's this like championing of when other people go through it and they come out on top, but when we're going through it, it's hard. And it's like this sucks and I don't want to deal with it, but it's what's required, you know. You have to beat the metal into shape. You have to uh you know throw it into extreme heat in order to shape it into the mighty dagger that you need it to be or whatever. It's the pot needs to be under a lot of attention and spinning really fast. It's probably dazed and confused, right? And then there's the idea of like the diamond and under pressure, or
Yeah.
the eagle that goes through the molting process, or all of it.
Yeah.
It sucks, and but we have to go through it, and
Yeah.
um the perspective just has to remind us all the time that, like, hey, uh yeah, it's okay for it to suck, but also you gotta go through it, and the Lord is pruning and taking us somewhere with it. Yeah.
Well, and that the secret there, right? Or the message right there and what you said is there are different processes for everyone, but everyone goes through this like pruning and shaping and maturing process.
Yep.
If you want to go faster, like I don't know, try being humble, try having trust in God.
Yep.
Guess who isn't very humble or doesn't have much trust in God? Me.
Yeah.
Uh,
I actually wonder, do you think that maybe part of this whole the Lord bouncing you around a bit has to do with him teaching you how to trust him?
oh, definitely. I mean, there's like trust in the sort of like provisional financial sort of monetary literal sense, right? Which I've come to sort of realize like, okay, I can go anywhere and I'll land somehow, somewhere. God will pull something, bring something forward or pull something out or do
Yeah.
something. That's not as hard as trusting him with myself,
Hmm.
right? That's
How
not as hard.
so?
Huh?
How so?
Um that's not trusting him with like earthly provision isn't as hard as really trusting him with the fact that I'll be seen or heard or loved, you know,
Okay.
underneath sort of everything else. That's my sort of question, right? Am I loved? And it came out of my particular background, my particular story. I think we went into that during the first
Yeah.
episode a little bit. But I'm in a place where like, okay, so me personally, if I can't be loved or if I don't feel like I can be loved, then I want power, right? So that you can't hurt me.
Yeah.
Surrendering, trusting God with my safety, trusting God that I'll be okay, trusting God that he'll move, that he'll intercede or intervene or change things is really, really hard. And then trusting him that he'll move and that'll intercede and that'll change things. And then he doesn't for some particular reason. That's even harder.
Yeah.
That's what I'm reconciling right now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's a real process. It's tough to go, okay, Lord, like I have no clue what I'm gonna do next, or uh I feel out to sea and without a pit paddle, and it sucks, and I feel like you're not changing anything. It's hard to deal with. Um,
Well, I have a whole history of like, okay, God, why didn't you intervene here? Why didn't you stop this? You show me that your heart breaks for me in the middle of it all. I think um, Jericho's episode, which as of now is, as a recording, is the most recent one.
yeah,
Who knows when this gets out? Um, that's something that God showed him, and something that I feel very like strongly and keenly when I pray, when I intercede, is that to intercede for someone, to pray, really is to take on, at least in some measure, what they're going through, to feel and go through that with them, or the gap for them in that. And so God's heart is always breaking when we're hurting, when we're breaking. And he's still sovereign, but he also makes um he built systems into this world, you know? He built a structure and a pattern and a sort of these threads of tapestry into this world. And he let us have our go with it, you know,
yep,
make our choices. And so that's really, really hard to like how do you reconcile all that together?
yeah. Well, I mean, not that I have a kid yet, but because I'm thinking a lot about it, there's I was reading something earlier, the guy talking about how parenthood is one of the biggest like gospel messages ever, because it's like you got this kid that is um believing that most of what you're doing is against them, or like in an effort to destroy them or whatever, but in reality like all of it is unto like the best future for them. And it's like it sucks because you look at them and they're like they're struggling with it. We don't understand what God's putting us through,
Yeah.
and yet he's going like, I know it sucks, I'm sorry, but like this will get you where you're going. And I liked what you brought up, Jericho. I liked what he said about like sometimes the Lord just wants to go through it with you. And I think most of the time it is towards sanctification, but if it is that he just wants to go through it with you, like who are we, you know?
Yeah. Question, right? And that's the thing that I'm working through and struggling with is okay, so his heart broke for me. Is that enough for me?
Mm,
If I'm honest, the answer for me right now is no,
yeah,
right? That wasn't enough,
yep.
which is, you know, an intensely, you know, arrogant thing to say, but I'm human.
All right, well, I get it. I mean, like even when I was going through my dark night of the soul, so to speak, um, I a lot of times felt like just like Lord, like what the hell? Like where are you? What are you doing? Like maybe you care, but do you even love me? And like
Yeah.
all that. So I think it's human to I think it's a human thing to go through those
Yeah.
seasons and work through it. And I think, even just a testament, in my own life is that, he does. The beautiful thing is that he does always eventually reconcile it. Um, and I'm starting to see it in my own life, especially in like multitude of different seasons of how he's reconciled all the seasons that sucked.
Yeah.
But it takes time and it sucks because it's like, all right, well, I'm 35 and here we are, like just like having just started some of these processes, it's like, okay, all right, God, finally. So, yeah,
Yeah,
man.
it's it's a winding road, I think.
Hmm.
And I've been around enough and been through enough like cycles like down into the dark and back to the light to know that he's there, that he's faithful, that I'm irrevocably tied to God, right? I can see the shape of the pattern and the sketch of sort of the picture and the image going forward, you know? And so I think what I'm working on now is letting go of the old, trying to forgive, which is not easy. Grudges run in my family.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and I don't know, trying to trust because I have a lot of broken hopes. And it felt in a way like even when I moved here, like there was a war around hope here. And that spilled out into me because I take on the things of the land, you know, anywhere I go. And so like the first few weeks I moved here, there was a lot of like coming head to head with broken hopes and broken dreams and finally like letting go.
Yeah.
And I'm still bitter about that. I'm still resentful. I'm still working through that part. But I think what was happening there was God needed me to like let go of those pictures of the future of whatever it was I thought it was, you know, of the sort of like even like interpretation of prophecy that's where it come to the sort of like my timeline, my sort of like hopes, all of that because if it's in our hands, it's not really living, right? We have a living hope, and that's in Jesus. And so I kind of I kind of think that that had to go to Jesus.
Yeah.
I think that's where it remains, right? I don't feel hopeless. I don't really have, you know, many plans for the future right now. Just sort of like in a place living day by day, trying to really just live day by day. But I don't feel hopeless because, you know, as shitty as I'm feeling, it's just, it lives outside of me, you know?
Yeah.
I think that's
That's,
the way.
I think you're right. Like, I feel like if we're holding on to things too tightly, we're just smothering it out. But it's when we finally let go and let God,
Yeah.
that's when things start to thrive. That's when they start to. It's that whole you know, in order to live, you have to die, right? We've already done it a couple times if you think about it, from the sperm into the egg, the sperm like plants into the egg and it dies and then it process into the womb and then the womb, the child goes through its process of like death and rebirth through the process of birth. It's sort of that whole thing. Same thing with the mustard seed. It has to die but in the ground for it to raise back up and live again. And it's that whole thing, like, which is honestly, it's the structure in which the entire world is built upon, but it's also the gospel and its
Yeah.
purest form. Everything speaks to it, whether it be the sun that dies and becomes a black hole, or the star that becomes a black hole, or whatever, or it's just everything has that cycle. And we have to let things die for them to live a lot of times, but it's hard.
It is. I mean, I think there's a lesson in the seasons in
Yeah.
that, right? Everything passes. The bad news is that everything passes, and
Yep.
the good, everything passes,
Yep.
right? So, and that's the hope of the promise, right? The hope of a promised future that's coming, the hope of heaven coming now.
Yep.
And so, if we really believe our actions echo into eternity, it's a hard switch to make. It's like I haven't fully made that switch. I'm still like working through it, I'm still pissed off, honestly, about any number of things, a number, towards God. But if we really believe like our actions echo into eternity, then maybe the hardships we're dealing with now are worth, the next 10 generations thriving.
Yep.
You know, and I think I've been going back through like Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, all that, There was at one point in the middle of the wilderness where God is so done. Even God is done with these stinking Israelites. And he's like, all right, Moses, here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna go and wipe them all out, and I'll make you into the promised nation.
Hmm.
You know? And Moses changes God's mind. Moses says, like, no, don't do that. That's not true to who you are, right? That's not true to your name. All the other nations will say that you just led them out to destroy them. That's not you. That's not what you're doing. And that moment right there, that moment changed the whole world. That changed the shape of history. And so, what I am trying to learn, what I think getting back into community, learning what it's like to live again with people, because it's hard living with people. What that is sort of like showing me is, God thinks on a much bigger time frame, a much bigger scale than we do,
Yep.
Right? I think that's also partly the lesson of Job, right? Um, and so, maybe like the suffering and all the times you wanted God to intervene and there was crickets, nothing, nada, silence. Maybe all those times of like silence and scarcity and thinness and um, suffering or dryness, maybe it's going to be worth something because on the books, right? What it's working now, maybe even what it's preparing you for now is going to impact the next, 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 1,000 generations. I think that's part of being centered, like anchored in eternity, right? Living and engaging here because, this moment is the only moment we have, but living as if it really does affect eternity.
Yeah. That's been a theme lately of legacy. I mean, I was talking to my friend Toby just the other day, uh, and we were talking about the reality of legacy. I mean, he pointed out, it reminded me of Solomon is the one that built the temple, but it was David's dream.
Yeah.
And there's so
That's
many,
hard.
huh?
That's hard.
That is hard.
Must have been hard for David.
Yeah. Or Moses didn't get to go into the promised land.
No.
Yeah. Abraham didn't get to really like see the promise. He had two kids, and one of them was, you know, he was
Yeah.
cast out. So he had like one kid of promise, and he's like, I don't get to see the many nations part. That's tough. But it's real, and he made the point too, and I loved this. He goes, the problem is that we grew up on hero stories, superhero stories. We grew up on these like you can be a superhero, like dreams, and it's all about you, and also a narcissistic culture, like it's all about you, and so legacy is like the last thing that our generation thinks about. And even generations that are thinking about legacy, a lot of times there's still some like desire for certain things to pan out a certain way in your own life, but sometimes it's not about you, it's about your next generation. And at the very least, the things that you are meant to do, you hope that, your kids get to like that you get to accomplish them well so that your kids don't have to, like breaking generational curses or something like that. But I think about all the time, like, what if some of what like my uncle was built to do because he and I have like had like now that I'm older, I'm like, oh, like we had these things similar. Like, what if some of that was passed on to me because of the fact that like he never lived it out and he died without living it out, Like I think about stuff like that, and maybe it's not like who knows, but you want to do your part well so that like your kids don't have to take on more than they're supposed to, but at the same time, your kids are gonna have to take on whatever you don't finish, and you're probably not gonna finish most of the things. And like legacy is actually a good thing to be thinking about, and it's new to me. I never thought about it before. But then I was like, oh, maybe I do want kids. And then I met Emma, and then we're having kids, and I'm like, okay, legacy. Whoa, what is this? What is this? It's crazy. And it's one of the reasons why I started learning as much as I have about spiritual authority and stuff, because I'm realizing I'm like, okay, there's a lot of stuff in me that I have to make sure is dead, because I don't want it passing on, you know?
And
So,
that's one of the things I heard is um, your children only go like as far as you work through your trauma or your stuff, right? They only go that far and then they have to deal with it, right? This stuff gets passed down. It's not for nothing that God says, like, yeah, I'll punish like the sins of the father onto the children for like 3 or 4 generations. That's that speaks that's speaking to this reality of things are passed down, right? We can look at that psychologically, we can look at that like
genetically,
genetically, we can look at that like economically, we can look at that, sociologically, like historically, things get passed down and repeated again and again until someone goes and deals with them. I think there's a wonderful quote. I don't remember. It might have been like C.S. Lewis or Tolkien or something, or G.K. Chesterton or something like that. But they said something to the effect of children need fairy tales not because they need to know the dragons exist. They already know the dragons exist. They need to know that like dragons can be slain.
yes.
And so and this is how it sort of goes, right? In a bloodline or in a family line, like something ricochets off a family line for generations after generation ad nauseum until someone steps forward to deal with it.
Yep. That's
And
true.
it's good. It is immensely good, right? Because it's as much as like dealing with your problems or dealing with these patterns across generations might help you. It helps like so many more people down the line, right? generations down the line. So it's good because it's selfless.
Yep.
It's also really hard, and it sucks to be the chain breaker sometimes.
Yep.
But it's good and it's necessary, and it's another one of those like I think shifts that um I really hope people are making. I really think we need to make. I have a lot of hope for the young generation, right? The kids are being born now or in the last like 5 or 10 years. I've met a lot of them who they have this sort of like golden glow on the spirit. God sort of like picked them out very young. And I know that they're just either with God very young or open to him very young or are going to be. And
Yeah.
different, I think different gifts and different calls and different stuff going on with like the ones I've met, the kids I've met that have had this sort of like this light or this sense or this feeling on them in the spirit, right?
Sure.
Different stuff, each of them, because, different families, bloodlines, but God's really, he's, kind of stacking the deck, I think, in his favor. I think he's doing something really wonderful, like across the generations,
Yep.
and with the new generations now. I think your kid is going to be like one of those kids with like there's something about him, like God just on them or with them very young.
Yeah.
That's um what I've sort of seen and prayed and all that.
Right. That's what we're praying for sure, and that's why we picked the names we picked. But we'll talk about those once the kid's born. But yeah, I I see it too. I mean, you got the what's being called the silent revival happening in the UK and the Europe. You've got, I feel like Gen Z especially, maybe less so millennials because some of us have our heads too far up our butt, but there's definitely Gen Zers and stuff that are flocking to orthodoxy more than ever because they're realizing like, oh, the way the world's going is trash and we want something real. And so
Yeah,
that's happening. And I do think that there's a generation coming up that's gonna just reject the way of the world right now because it's so trash. And I think that's a cycle anyway. I think that happens cyclically. Anyhow, like, well,
yeah,
they have that saying that strong men create good times create bad, like
yeah.
weak men create hard
Oh,
times, and then hard times create strong men.
yeah.
Yep, that whole thing. And
It's the cycle of history.
it is, and that's one reason why like history repeats every 80-ish years or so. But
Yeah,
uh, one of the things that I wanted to hit real quick about the whole like passing down things, that's not just curses and blessings. That's also, I mean, we see it even in epigenetics. So how well you take care of yourself, that also affects which genetics get passed on. So you could have some trash genetics, and theoretically, if you take care of yourself, or even if you're just really leaning into the Lord, then that can trigger better genetics to pass down.
yep,
And that's one reason why there's this belief that Ham, his wife, gave birth to a lineage that became Nimrod and eventually the
yeah.
reinstitution of the Nephilim
Not a, yeah,
as the Rephaim because of epigenetics. Ham was so uh, vile that it flipped the genetics markers on in his kids.
yeah,
Possible. It's probable. I mean, we see it in epigenetics now of, parents with terrible dispositions turn on certain genetic markers in their kids. It's crazy.
yeah. I I think that's very true. And on when it comes to ham, I think that's very possible and very plausible. More, I think, gets passed down than maybe we realize. Like not just curses, blessings. You know, um, down on the genetic level and on the
Mhm.
level of spirit, like things get passed on. And I do think at the same time, like certain bloodlines and lineages have like certain callings or certain authority, certain things to do, maybe even in the world. And like take all of that with like take all that with grace, take all that with salt. There is like I think we do get quite a bit of choice on how we live our day-to-day life, how much we engage on what we engage with, even on the genetic or epigenetic level, like you can still play the cards you've been dealt, right? You can
Yep.
still choose choose to do things a different way or a better way or really whichever way you want. It's just gonna have an impact, gonna have consequences because all of our choices have consequences. Um, so don't take that as like no one take that as like being railroaded. You're not being railroaded. You're not doomed or cursed. You know, you're not stuck necessarily. Unless you are then talk to God about that. I don't know. Maybe this is one of the things though. Like this is one of the reasons why God wins. Like he won on Calvary like 2,000 years ago, of course, and that is an ongoing victory that happened, is happening, is gonna happen. Is being walked out partially now, completely later. At least as far as the natural goes. Like as far as the spiritual goes, it's over. He's won.
Yep.
You know, and we're gonna see the fruition of that when during the return, all that. But it's one of the reasons why God wins because you could have 1,000 generations of iniquity, and that fire, that ember catches in the right person at the right time. A whole bloodline is turned around. An unbroken chain of wickedness going back 1,000 years is turned around in one lifetime because someone got on their knees and said, Jesus, I need,
Yep.
right? And that's also partly how the kingdom is built, like I think a lot of people, like probably more people than not, have come out of like some sort of trauma or some sort of like sucky experience or rough situations, rough times, rough past or childhood or whatever. Like it's common, right?
Yep.
One thing we all share is pain doesn't discriminate. Suffering doesn't discriminate, which is actually like a really sucky like consolation. But there you go. Either which way, like we're all coming out of something and we're all going somewhere, right? You know, I think there's a saying. I don't remember who it's by, but every saint has a past and every sinner has a future,
Yep.
right? And so, like, I think this is just part of the whole realizing the fabric that we're in, realizing the sort of tapestry that we're crafting and that the kingdom is crafting.
Yep.
That's how you build the kingdom. Not everyone has like a pedigree of like, yeah, three or four or five generations back, we were preachers. So we're gonna keep being preachers. Some people have that. I think there were a few people, like maybe one of the leaders guys at Bethel has that. Whatever. That had to start somewhere,
Yep.
right? And so the blessings of a bloodline, the call of a bloodline, the the work and the trials of a bloodline are built one link at a time, you know. And you can be that first link, or you can be one of the connecting links, you know. But
Yeah.
either way, build something.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I just keep thinking about Lord of the Rings because I'm in the third book right now, and I mean, if, you think about the way that Tolkien talks about bloodlines. I mean, it's paralleled in the Bible with obviously the
Yeah,
line of David down to Jesus kind of a thing, and there's something to that, and I it's just funny because I'm thinking about it like Aragorn, he came from a line of kings, and even though the one king fell, It didn't change the fact that that bloodline had the anointing on it.
Yeah.
Uh, that's and so Aragorn was able to step into who he was meant to be, even though his lineage had failed when they got a hold of that ring. So that's something too. I don't know, but either way, it's
No, it's a very like it parallels like the first Adam and the second Adam, right?
yep,
One king fell and the world was went sideways,
yep,
right? The world um the ring, I've heard it said that the ring represents sin,
probably.
right? Because like everyone wants it and it corrupts you.
Yep,
And it doesn't serve you. It only serves its own master, right? Or itself. Um and so like there's such a picture in Return of the King, in the whole like lineage of Aragorn, of like the fall of Adam, right? Adam fell, sin entered the human race, the whole world went sideways. But 1,000 generations later, I don't actually know how many generations. I'm using hyperbole. Whatever. don't don't at me. Many generations later, you know, of that same bloodline, because that was still important, right? That still mattered. There was still like a connection there back to the beginning. There was still a kingly sort of anointing there. Comes this new king that um, destroys the works of the enemy, right?
yep.
This literal work of the enemy. He was part of like destroying it,
Hmm.
And he sets the world in order.
Yep.
And that's one of the many, many, many pictures of Jesus in the Lord of the Rings.
Exactly, exactly. But it is that picture of like you have to go through the hard stuff. I mean, Aragorn went through way harder stuff than he should have had to. I mean, you think about it, his purpose was to be in the lineage of kings, so he should have been in that throne room his entire life, but he wasn't. And so it's the same thing with like I think why this conversation is beneficial for people to hear is to remember that like, hey, everybody's going through it, and it's actually good that you're going through it. I mean, I think about the sort of corny saying that like if you're going through it that means you're doing something right because the devil wouldn't harass somebody that's doing it that isn't going through it so much. But then again, I think he probably would a little bit because he revels in in tormenting us regardless. But I do think that he puts extra work in on those that are doing the process well and actually chasing after the Lord because he wants to discourage us and that's why these seasons of really difficult times and even going like what you're going through or what I've been through where it's like these different places literally there is a gold nugget. There's this book that my wife and I are reading or that I'm reading to the baby while the baby's in the womb still and it's called uh, it's on Hind's feet. High, no, Hind's feet and high places or something like that. And it's
To
huh?
me, you mentioned it before to me, not maybe not to the podcast,
I
but
don't no, I haven't. But
sorry,
the huh?
sorry.
No, you're good. The the idea of it is that like as she's going through all these different things, she's picking up these rocks and putting them in her memorial thing because every season, every step, everything that we go through, every place that we live in or whatever, we're picking up both tools in the tool belt is how I say it a lot of times, or experiences that will be beneficial later, or just, you know, um, uh, skills that we wouldn't have had otherwise, or there's a place that we can go to where the Lord breaks something off of us while we're there, or he puts a spotlight on this issue, like because he wouldn't have been able to as easily in another place, or I don't know, or but every season, every place that we go to, every place that the Lord leads us to, which, by the way, is a reason why we should be more willing to follow the Lord into things that don't make sense. Just
Yeah.
saying, is
Yeah.
because it all leads unto these stones that we can look back on and go like, okay, Lord, you did this at this point, and it is unto something later. And so I'm not saying quit your job and go move across country unless the Lord's telling you quit your job and move across country, in which case you should probably quit your job and move across country. Um,
Bad. I've done
huh?
it ain't so bad. I've done it once or twice by now.
Same, same. So it's all process and it's good and it's good for people to hear that, like even people like us that people may look up to and go like, wow, they like with you, like, oh, he's got this crazy gifting, or like me, where people are a lot of times like I'll be told sometimes that they're inspired by the life I lead, but it's like even we go through hell,
Yeah.
and it's it's a natural part of life, and it's okay that they may be going through it too.
If I, I'm sure there are other people that have said it or said similar, but like if you only knew like what it cost, the gifting wouldn't seem so incredible or so wondrous, you know? And I think that's true of everything, like of anything true, of anything like really valuable or really important, not worldly important.
Right. But even
But
in that,
well, even that too, yeah. There's a reflection of all those things tend to be costly. And creating, building tends to be a process, tends to take time. Even God took 7 days to do it. And could he have done it instantly? Probably yes. But
yep,
I mean, yes, of course he could. But he did it in part because he built a reality. He built this creation that runs on process, that runs over seasons, you know.
yep,
And so the stones that you picked up along the way, right? To go back to what you said, the stones that you picked up as a memorial, the skills, the lessons, all the seasons of, you know, being scourged, being cleansed, being purified, being refined, being mature, being raised up, being taught, being instructed, being trained, all the things that you picked up along the way, that becomes the altar of your life.
yep.
Go back to that picture. Joshua, the Israelites gathered together to cross the Jordan into the land of promise, into the new thing, into the place that God had said, I'm going to give this to you. You know, that whole process, which has felt like the last few years for me, season after season, gradually moving along. What's at the other end of that is if we look at scripture, if we look at Joshua, he sets up an altar, right, of those stones, well, of uncut stones, of the things that we picked up along the way, in this sort of like analogy. And he sets up an altar and he says, like, we're going to worship God here, and then we're going to go forward. And the things that we picked up along the way, I think, like often those are the stones that become the altar of our lives, right?
Hmm.
And so when we play out this sort of like story, when we play out like live out these patterns, um, seeking God, walking with God in it, being a faithful and obedient where He calls us, we're living out an act of worship. Like our lives itself becomes worship, right? And there's a reason, right? The Holy Spirit lives inside of us, so we're the temple now. You know, and the train of his robe fills the temple. You know what that means, right? In
Yep.
ancient days, like all the ancient kings, they would have a train to their robe, right? This long, fancy train. They'd take their enemies, like their defeated enemies after they had won, and take their enemies' train to their robe and put it on their own. And so the train of God's robe fills the temple. That means he's won. God is victorious. Hallelujah, right? That hallelujah itself literally means God is victorious. God's won. Something like that. So hallelujah to the hallelujah God.
Yep. Yep. The conqueror. But it's also, the train of his robe was dipped in blood.
Yeah.
And the woman reached out and touched the train of his robe and was healed. And there's that whole thing. But yeah, I think you're
There's,
right.
there's
Yep.
layers to this. And the secret, the trick is this gets played out over seasons,
Yes.
over months and days, many days and days and days that you don't feel it,
Yep.
right? Like, and that's
And it's how you gain authority over things.
yeah,
Like when you're wrestling through something, you gain authority in it, and that's why you are able to help other people through it later, or even in just your family line. Like that's how you create space for your children to not have to go through that thing because you have authority over it and you tell it to get the hell out of your family. Like
yeah,
you ain't coming in and kicking my kids around. I got authority here because I won over you. Like I've taken the train of your robe and now I have that proverbial crown that I'm gonna cast at the feet of Jesus.
yeah. Oh, and it's that's how Jacob became Israel in the first place, right? He wrestled with God. And so the things that we struggle with and the things that we wrestle with and persevere with or persevere through. There's a verse in uh first first Peter, I think, where he talks about that, or Peter First Peter 1 or something, where he talks about like, yeah, build don't build with things that are passing, build with the things that are like refined and purified, right? When you persevere, like persevere unto the I don't remember the exact phrasing. And currently right now, like my Bible is holding up my phone. So I'll find it later. But it's just that whole thing of when you when you're building something, right? Build with the things that matter. Persevere through it, you know, so that your faith and your character is purified and refined by fire. You know? I'm wildly paraphrasing.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
you get sort of my drift and sort of my point and sort of what we've been talking about, right? You gain authority, you gain identity in in the wrestle and in the process and seeking God through it, you know?
Yep.
And that's how you get position in the kingdom. That's how you get authority in the kingdom. You're willing to obey and you were willing to humble yourself to actually like put the time in,
Yep.
seek God in the middle of it. When we persevere and press into God, even when it sucks, even when, like my own example, even when I'm bitter or resentful or frustrated, which is a hard thing to do. It takes a lot of like choosing by moment, you know?
Yep.
It really it really does something.
Yep.
And it turns you into the kind of person that God can trust.
Yep.
God can trust with his treasures. And the thing that he treasures more than anything is his people, you know?
Yep.
So
Yep. And it's okay to have those feelings towards the Lord. You don't grab hold of them and then make them your identity or whatever, but like you can feel them and you have to process them. Like it is human to have these emotions, to have these struggles, to have this stuff, this paradigm that you're working through, but it is okay to feel it. And I think that's something in the church that like we get wrong on one side or the other. We like, oh no,
Yeah.
you're not allowed to feel any of those feelings. So
How,
pretend they didn't happen.
you know,
Huh?
how dare you, you sinner? Like,
Yeah.
think about God. God's gonna smite you. All that.
Yep. So you have that paradigm where it's like, hey, don't ever have those feelings. Like you're not allowed to have those feelings. And then on the flip side, it's the people that are like, oh, I'm gonna take up these feelings and now they're my identity and screw God, I'm deconstructing. It's like
Yeah.
no, what's healthy is to feel the feelings and process them and get to the root of why you're feeling those feelings so that you can you can like learn why you're feeling that thing and overcome it.
Yeah.
Because more often than not, it's because we're believing a lie about something that we've deep seated, you know? And I know that's true for me most of the time when I would have an issue with, I mean, honestly, just in anything, whether it be with another person or with the Lord or with myself, like there was a lie that I was believing, and if I never felt the feelings, then I never would have processed through them and figured out like, oh, there's something deeper here. Let's go there. There's something deeper there. Let's go there, and let till you find the root of the issue. So it's okay to feel it and to process it, and I think that's one of the
It's
important things here.
it just can't become your whole world, right? Like it, you just have to have perspective, right? Um,
In a world where most people's feelings become their identity.
yes,
Don't do that.
or in a world where we're used to like, 5 second, 10-second snapshots of this or that or the other, and then swipe, scroll, whatever. There is something actually like I think on one level very like very insidious and very profane about like how much like attention and life force is just being sucked away by apps, by social media, by advertising, by all the things that bombard us. But that's that's what our next discussion should be about. I'm
Right.
just gonna list of like topics or conversations to have. But
Yeah.
um yeah, I think you just I'm I've been around like been through enough of these cycles and patterns, been walking with God long enough that like I recognize the story, I recognize the pattern, I recognize the sound of his voice, right? I have some sense of perspective of like, okay, yeah, this is gonna pass. I don't need to be angry or bitter or frustrated about it, right? Like I can let it go. But I'm gonna be a level with you. I'm 28. That feels ancient to me, and then some days I feel like twice or three times my age. But I'm still young, and we're all still young compared to the ancient of days.
Yep.
So, like, I think we're just never not children, right? Like of course, we're adults, and we pay taxes, and we have all the adult privileges and powers. Who the hell gave us that? Um, but there's something to be said, like before God, we're all children. We're all little children, right? We came. If you can't understand that, like that's the core ethos of this thing. That's the core ethos of this kingdom. Jesus said, um, yeah, you only enter the kingdom of heaven like little children, right? And I recognize that, and so it's still hard, right? With even having a sense of perspective, it's still hard, you know, letting go. It's still hard obeying. It's still hard, like with the wrestle. I think it's really healthy, along with like acknowledging our feelings, is just some sort of like key points, like don't let them drive you from God, let them drive you to God, right? And
Yes,
that mean
man.
that can like confessing them to God, saying like, God, I'm really mad at you right now. He knows anyway. Like you're not gonna catch him out by surprise. I think there's a verse, something like, the eyes of the Lord test the hearts of men, or something like that. Like he sees it all, he knows it all. Like he's not surprised when you're upset. And so just being honest about that, I think is important. Not letting it become your whole world. Um, or at least letting it pass when its time is over. That can be hard too. But keeping as best you can perspective that like, okay, there's more than this. I'm gonna I'm gonna be frustrated or upset or whatever I'm feeling right now. And I'm gonna just keep breathing and the next breath is gonna be better. We're gonna be different, you know? Sometimes it really just is like that sometimes. Um and then just even in the middle of all that, like having the awareness and the grace to say, like, I'm really upset with you, Lord, but you're still good, you're still God, you're still right. I might not feel that you're good and right and correct and in that, but I acknowledge that. I'm sure I'll come back to that. It is hard.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's all into something, and it's good to feel. It's good to deal with it. It's good to embrace humanity because we were created humans on purpose.
Yeah.
If he didn't want us to have feelings, then he wouldn't have made us human. Just saying.
Oh, but I wanted to embrace penguin and amity. I wanted to live the life of a penguin. No, no. I
I mean,
mean,
you could go be one of those people that lives in an igloo up there, maybe, but it's about as close as you're gonna get.
I don't know. Being a penguin sounds better than living in an igloo, but
I don't know. It's 2025. You can identify as anything, apparently.
I guess. Anyway, I'm joking, but
Yep.
um,
Jokes, folks.
yeah, just putting that out there for anyone taking us too seriously. But um, yeah,
Yeah, no, I think it's good. I think it's good for people to see the process, man. So,
yeah. I it's hard, right?
yeah.
But it's good.
Yep.
I think they you can know something's true and not experience that something's true.
Exactly.
That's the other side of this, right? Is like you can know all this stuff about God, but this is one of the things that we miss out a little bit from the translations. Like the Hebrew word for knowing was like experiential knowledge, right? Primarily. It's why we use so and so knew his wife and they had a kid, you know, as a euphemism because it's to know someone like on that level of like of intimacy and experience, right? Like you probably know Emma more than like any other person by this point.
Yep.
And so
That doesn't mean that you don't get feelings that lie to you sometimes. And that's the thing, is feelings may be real, but that doesn't mean they're true. So
yeah.
stop basing your entire identity around what you feel. Sorry, what did I say?
Oh, sorry. You sound like you need some water or something. What?
Oh, crap.
Don't know where that came from. Um,
But at the same time,
yeah,
your feelings are real, and but
yeah,
like an experiential knowledge of who the Lord is, that's gonna get you further than anything.
it is. I think that's part of why sometimes there are hiccups in the road. You know, these things take seasons because you know to live with God takes seasons, right? It's living every moment for Him, you know, and so every moment with Him, and so to build those experiences with God, like you do life with God.
Nope.
And that takes time. And so I think that's part of why like sometimes things take longer than we expect, right? God's moving us from just like theoretical knowledge to experienced, felt knowledge to from knowing something's true to living like something's true. And that's I'll tell I'm going to repeat what we've been saying the whole time. Like that's hard and it's costly. It's costly. It's what I'm learning now in community. First off, that hey, I could be in community. Sometimes community is pretty okay, and there are some cool people out there. It's not all bad. And then on the other side, like there's hope, there's joy. I can trust God. I know that, but I haven't lived that, or I've lived that very spottily, you know. But to move forward into the new thing, sometimes some of the old has to go. You have to step more fully into the reality of things. And the reality of things is God is good. God gives joy and delight and takes joy in you. God is our living hope. And he expects us to live full of hope, right? Love, hope, and joy, right? And so I find that I've been living each day filled up and poured out again. So I fill up with God. I'm poured out. Oh, so very much at work. Again, working with the homeless is a totally wild experience. Uh, and I'm poured out just trying to come to God, trying to choose better patterns, better rhythms, trying to choose the God reaction, trying to be present, trying to let go of the past, trying to not get stuck in despair over the future, And I'm poured out. I go back and rest. I go back and just ask God for more. And then the next day, right, filled up and poured back out. And that's been a grinding, grueling process. It is grinding me down, but maybe it's also shaping.
Yeah.
And so I find that like I have to stay engaged.
It's the key.
It's a key, and I think to some degree it's war, right? Again, going back to Joshua, just because it's a good sort of picture. When you cross over into the promised land, right? When you cross the river, when you step into the promise, into the new thing. Turns out, don't know if anyone warned you, there are giants in the land. All right. And so, right, it's war. They have to fight to drive out the Philistines and the Amalekites and just all of them,
Yep.
And that, like looking at the book, looking at the Bible, that took generations in and of itself, right? But we do what we can do, and I think big picture, like I said, we're in a season where what we sow now and how we engage with the promise before it comes to pass right now is really important, and it's going to help determine how we land when God goes this way and the nations go that way, the other way, right? And it's really important now because it's going to get us ready to take and hold and live, in the promise that God has for us in the next thing, in the next season, and whatever that is for you, right? The next call, the next part. So
that's a lesson. That's a lesson to be learned, to live well, so that so that things work out well for you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thanks for Thanks for the combo, man. I think it'll benefit a lot of people.
I think so. I hope so.
Yeah. Well, thanks for listening, guys. If you enjoy the episode, share it. If you get something out of it, let us know. Leave a comment, something like that. And I reckon I'm several episodes deep because I got a kid coming soon. So by the time this comes out, I will probably have that kid, and I might even be elsewhere. So hopefully by then I will have caught up or started recording again, so I don't get fall behind. But either way, I will catch you guys in the next one, and peace.